Eumeswil by Ernst Jünger, 1977, produced by Parker Banks at pbanks.net and youtube.com/pbanks. A day in the city. 44. A day in the Kasbah, from one morning to the next, and yet I have said little about my work. The length of a day is not fixed by the clock. It hinges on our imagination, on the playing of our thoughts. Images make time pass since they banish boredom. They also increase the contents. The ideal would be the moment in which time concentrates, even annihilates itself, and everything becomes possible. Light becomes more intense. It becomes absolute. On this, as on every morning, my relief comes. I relinquish the night bar and everything in it. I turn in my key and my uniform at the office. During my absence, the studio remains locked. The great luminar is top secret. Now I can head for the city. The Stronghold Mountain is already warm. The descending footpath, cutting through the curves of the paved road, is a red arrow pointing at the harbor. Green lizards whisk across it, vanishing in the euphorbia. They are indifferent to the tufts of spines. My pay is in my pocket, and I jingle the gold pieces. I will stop at the harbor. Latifa is expecting me. I notified her through Madame Poser. Latifa cannot receive messages directly. All she has is the grey phonophore, which is limited to official announcements from the Kasbah and with which one can hear but not transmit. If any vestiges of a class or caste system have survived in the atomized society of Eumeswil, they are expressed in the phonophore. The rights are of a dynamic nature. They are based on power and not on property. Latifa, between us, was the next best woman to come my way. I spotted her the very first time I went off duty. Her beat is over the waterfront among the brokers, ship chandlers, and small taverns. That is where she walks up and down. Half-time is marked by Madame Poser's albergo, a cramped, shabby hotel de passe with narrow stairs going up several stories. Outside the taproom, 2 round tables and some chairs are set up on the sidewalk. Madame rents out by the hour. Few patrons wish to spend the night. Latifa approaches no one, but her slow steps and querying looks reveal that she expects to be approached. And then there is her grey phonophore. This area has a better clientele. Steersmen, pursers, chief stewards, even a notary or an effendi with a sudden urge. It will not hold him up for long. I have grown accustomed to her. Basically, I prefer the women in the lower harbour galleon figureheads with protruding breasts, and Medusas from the river basin with impudent stares and swaying buttocks. But one seldom avoids a ruckus. The harbour police have their hands full, especially when a big ship is lying at anchor. We sit at one of the round tables. A pattern of holes is punched into its metal. If you spill something, no traces remain. Madame serves the aperitif. The sun is already above the rooftops. The light is good. I peer at Latifa like a slave trader before the gavel comes down. There is something ancient about her, something of the early Persepolis. The teeth are of prime importance. They tell about the bone structure. In the left upper row, a gold tooth, which does not really bother me. The tooth is exposed by a smile that lends a mysterious depth to the features. It is an ineradicable male error to treat this as a sign of intelligence. Latifa never applies rouge, only lipstick. Together with the black hair that dangles into her forehead, the lipstick makes her face seem even paler. Her facial skin has large pores. You wear long skirts. I suppose you have ugly legs. You'd like to see everything right on the street, sir? Not a bad comeback. Altogether, she eyes me in an appropriate way, critically, as if I were a fish caught in her net. My striped phonophore reveals a man from the Kasbah. These are brisk customers who demand no extras and avoid romantic soft soaping, and above all, they are solvent. Fine. Then up we go. Madame, I'll take care of the room right away. The aperitif is on the house. Professore, you'll be satisfied. She knows more about me than I suspected. This is unavoidable. Eumeswil is a village. We pause on the stairs. Comme hors d'oeuvre, des crudités. Truce, gas. You're in for something. Oh yes, I can tell. The Condor keeps you Kasbah boys on a tight leash. Sometimes it is not bad to be honored in the group. It normalizes a situation. Little is wasted on individuality. Upstairs in the room, a bed, a fireplace, the usual, drawn shutters, the sun filtering through the slats. "You do know how to treat a lady?" She sounds like a novice talking on a tape and rehearsing. I reach into my pocket and place a scudo on the mantel. "Oh, that's generous. And now take it off. A vos ordre, a votre service." Outside, the gulls sweeping past the gable are shrieking. The light here is neither too dim nor too bright. For an instant I see her standing at the fireplace, free and easy, her hands closed and on her hips, her breasts, not voluptuous yet well-shaped, archaic style detracting from the atmosphere. The Leyden jar, also known as the Cleistian jar, an apparatus for electric condensation, a glass cylinder partly coated both inside and out with metal foils. It would be better if it curved upward like a vase. The glass layer isolates through spatial separation. It operates as a restraint on time. When the circuit closes, a flash, a spark proclaims the annihilation of time. Whether a man dies or a mosquito, it does not matter. The atoms contain the mystery exploited by bios and psyche. They make the most of their talents. Latifa is to be taken as seriously as any other woman. She is leaning on the mantel again. I can gaze at her leisurely, the wan body, the dark delta, the black hair falling deeper into her forehead. My first impression is confirmed. She must have been conceived under a lucky star. In our lupanars at the upper edge of the city, one finds any and all heterae, from the classical ones of the Periclean age to the Hellenistic ones of the Diadochic era. There are albums to choose from, or else Madame claps her hands, le choix, and they present themselves en groupe. But Latifa would have seemed archaic even when Eumenes founded this city. She smokes a joint, touches up her lips in front of the mirror, prepares herself for the next customer. She is about to get dressed. She wears little on her body. The atmosphere is pleasant, clear contours like a mountain after a storm. I might now focus on a problem. Down below, a fishmonger is calling out his mackerels. Tutti freschi! It is still early. Here in the harbour and in the side streets, everywhere is chanted by the market women, the kitchen lads, the soft drink peddlers. Perhaps the condor will hold out longer than I assume. I'm in a good mood. "Latifa, you're worth your weight in gold. Do you make every man as happy as you do me?" She is again wearing a dark triangle around her hips, a thing of woven air. "Hey, I'm a joy girl, but some guys even cry." The married ones. "Oh, but they're not. They bawl because they can't do it or because they've done it. You Casbah boys never make a fuss." She disappears in the escalier, waving her handbag. These conversations have become habitual, recurring whenever I go off duty. I am curious by nature. Bit by bit I piece her life together, how it all came about, how it continued, who the first man was. Was it her seducer or her rapist? Almost like Niebeck, but sine ira. I want to know the details. She is of average intelligence, yet imaginative. A human being is revealed more in his lies than in his banal truth. His measure is his wishful thinking. Once, when she was standing at the fireplace again, something eerie occurred. The light began to flicker as before a short circuit. Instead of darkening, however, the room turned dazzlingly bright. I raised my arm to cover my eyes. The light shot between my ulna and my radius. The walls were virtually blasted away. Only the frame stood out. I saw a skeleton at the mantel, a scaffold of bones with a gold tooth. Next to its thighs, the garter clasps and the scudo which she had already stowed away. The small spiral inside the vulva. An experiment from the catacombs, either a failure or a flaunting of power. Sometimes these interventions unnerve the city, provoking a kind of paralysis. The clocks stop. A blackout follows as if time were blocked. They can also generate quakes and darkness, a brief shaking of the power of the Khans, quickly forgotten like a nightmare. I heard Latifa. "Should I come again to you?" This was the first time she put it that way. We were lying under the blanket, almost skinless, 2 embryos in the belly of Leviathan. Yes, it was good, a relapse into humanity. After she left, I found the scudo on the mantelpiece. She had put it back, well intended, but against the rules. At my next relief, she found 2 scudos. She took them without batting an eyelash. A smart girl. Still and all, we became intimate. 45. Latifa also serves as my lightning rod. Ingrid dislikes brutal embraces. She sticks to the absolute necessities, and even then I assume more as a favor. She never stands on ceremony, but she respects herself without being prudish. In our Eumeswil, she seems like a girl from abroad, like a far northern bird of passage in its winter quarters. Her figure is shorter than average, but nicely proportioned. If one saw her face in an anthropological museum, the label would say, "Female Swede." Why was it that the word twin flashed through my mind the first time I encountered her at the Institute? It must have been due to those nice proportions which seemed to have emerged from a foundry cast. In such instances, race wins out over individuality. Her color is blue. She wears linen, in shades from an almost whitish blue to very intense aquamarine with some lavender. Little jewelry aside from a cameo and sometimes a necklace, no ring. At meals, as in all her habits, she is simple. Fish soup without saffron and naturally without garlic. Con pepe if we dine together. I follow her example. She and Latifa know about each other. I do not keep them secret. Besides, Latifa's base of operations is very close to the pied-à-terre where I recover from dealing with dear Dad. Ingrid is not jealous. Latifa has no right to be jealous. Ingrid is reliable in her work. In this context, I am what is known as her doctoral advisor. Her devotion is almost filial. It culminates in incest. That was what I scented at our very first encounter. Vigo is the kind of prophet who is greatly honored save in his own country. Among insiders, his name, to the secret chagrin of his colleagues, is regarded as a mot de passe from Beirut to Uppsala. That is why his courses are always attended by students from far away. Once, when I was saying goodbye to him after one of our evenings, he said, "Incidentally, another snow goose has reported to me. She wants to work with us. She's got good marks, and she's also discovered a thing or two at the Luminar. I'd like you to take her off my hands." He acts as if these responsibilities were burdensome. In reality, they increase his prestige. The next morning, Vigo introduced us to each other at the Institute. He also suggested a thesis, the differentiation of authority in the ancient empires. The research was to include the colonies of the Western powers, especially proconsular autonomy. Sometimes the warrior caste is disempowered by the demos or by the Senate, and it then migrates to remote territories. That is how the motherland gets rid of its agitated minds, aristocrats and reactionaries. In those areas, as in nature reserves, they can wage old-fashioned wars against nomads and mountain tribes, adventures in service. On the other hand, they can turn dangerous when, like Caesar, they create their Gaul, or, like an Iberian general named Franco, return with their legionnaires during a crisis. That was roughly how Vigo pictured it. He said, "It is a vast domain. One ought to extract a leitmotif, perhaps the extrapolation. Mathematically, the extrapolation becomes less certain the farther one moves from the original field, in some cases right upon leaving it. Now see what can be done with this." And he left us to our own devices. He was right. A vast domain indeed. Still, distance has scarcely mattered since the development of airborne troops. Ingrid worked at the small luminar in one of our rooms, almost a cabin. I noticed that she attuned the blue of her clothing to her lavender sprig, and indeed she was quick at making good discoveries. Thus, in the archives of correspondence, she found a new version of Lord Clive's suicide. It also helped me in my definition of the Anak. She managed to dig up something fitting the theme in the 12 articles that an Anabaptist had set up during the Germanic Peasants' War. The text said that warfare between Christian nations, and thereby the arrière-ban, ought to stop. If any men were still left with an uncontrollable lust for war, they should be packed off to fight the Turks. During my service at the Kasbah, I let Ingrid use my office at the Institute with Vigo's permission. This gave her access to the great luminar. A year passed, but we realized that the topic was unraveling. After I spoke with the professor, we hit on a suggestion that was more to her liking. It concerned the Goldfinch plan. I can only sum it up. As we know, the Jews are drawn time and again to the Promised Land, as far back as during the Egyptian and then the Babylonian captivity, and during the scattering of their nation after the destruction of their city. Age-old quarrels like those with Ammon are revived. O Zion, high-built city. Through changing times, this remained one of their great dreams. Zionism tried to make it come true, reaching its goal during the era of the world wars, despite both external and internal resistance. Someone said, "This shows me that we are no smarter than the others." Religious and cultural Zionism cut itself off from national Zionism. As in all problems involving wishful thinking, there were fuzzy aspects. The edges blurred into one another. The Goldfinch Plan, by contrast, was down to earth, a program on a mercantile basis. I had heard only rumors about it. The term was not to be found in Herzl's or Bielik's correspondence. It had obviously been chosen as the symbol of a multicolored, disparate unity. The various countries were to give the Jews small, even minuscule territories, either leasing or donating them. Here a free city, there an island, a scrap of Yemenite desert, the tip of a peninsula, and so forth. The plan also was to provide Zion with a corridor to the sea. From there, the 12 tribes were to ply their commerce by means of a federal fleet, and shipyards and refineries were to produce their wares. For the various governments, it was still a long way to the world state. The contributions would have been minor compared with the advantages. Everyone knows about the stimulating effect that neutral free trade zones exert on large, closed empires. Often the merchant has achieved more in this context than the armies. The same applies to civilization, to the whole range of values. Such a situation could lead to a universal monetary framework. Vigo instantly pounced on this subject. I have already noted that he has a predilection for Venice. It could turn out very nicely. The Jews, gold, and the serpent, these are revealed mysteries. Ingrid was soon finding material in small journals and notes by students at the Archives of Correspondence. She was now quite adept at the Luminar. Above all, she grasped the gist of the Goldfinch problem. We had to go back to the Semitic roots. Early Mediterranean civilization is an inexhaustible model of all later systems, a foretaste. Thus, the Goldfinch Plan had already been implemented by the Phoenicians. Their voyages between their settlements, the trading posts they set up on barrier islands, the secret mines they worked even beyond the Pillars of Hercules, their commerce in highly desired items such as ivory, glass, purple, silver, the amazing abstraction of their currency system, all those things seemed more concentrated in their origins than in their repetitions. They demand a boldness, though more that of Odysseus and Sinbad than of the conquistadors. At this juncture, vast prospects opened up. For example, what would the Mediterranean be like if Hannibal had triumphed over Scipio the Elder or an Emir Musa over the Cross? It was also good that Ingrid went back to the bios. Navigation was secondary. There are plants, especially grasses, that spread out over steppes or prairies. Others thrive in isolated places remote from one another. Thus, the Phoenicians were first Semites, then seafarers. Whether wind, air, or ether, the challenge was to maintain the identity of the species at whatever distance. After the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus, that challenge was successfully met worldwide. Naturally, here as everywhere else, the gods had to be taken into account. No matter what, God is the Lord of Israel. Here, one might suspect, lay the weakness of national Zionism. It had oversimplified the biotope, removing it from the magical consensus and degrading it. 46. That was our theme on the day that we were spending together like many other days at the Luminar. But it was to go down as a special date. Private sessions with top students like Nebeck are agreeable, often exciting. One forgets all about eating or drinking, even about the body. A problem surfaces. It is thrashed out and illustrated by a historical reference. Flavius Josephus, a synagogue on the Upper Rhine during the Crusades, the Prague Cemetery, Dreyfus, his epaulets torn off, his sabre broken. The Book of Hours is illuminated often with merely a glowing initial. I see Ingrid at the Luminar, her delicate figure, her narrow hands, her intellectual devotion. I do not know whether Jenny Lind played an instrument, the Swedish nightingale. This was what she would have looked like at the piano, say, around the time when she was festively welcomed by the Göttingen students. Ingrid, I have a feeling that Hesiod mentions a Phoenician merchant. She begins to play. The keys appear to sink before her fingers so much as touch them. No one here can hold a candle to her memory. As if skiing down a forest lane, she cuts a trail straight through the thicket of numbers. Soon I see the stranger at the well, and next to him the girl. She follows him onto his ship. She does not return with her jug in the evening. This is an ancient song, like that of the wind and the wave. The luminar is a time machine that simultaneously abolishes time by leading out of it. This is not true always or for everyone, but in some passages one hears only the melody and forgets the instrument. Ingrid had rented a room near my father's house. I was accompanying her to her front yard in the moonlight. We continued our dialogue. In the shadows I saw only her face and hands. She was wearing her darkest dress and a more intense lavender. At this point, I should mention an ambivalence that surprises even me. The scent of lavender is usually off-putting. That was how I had perceived it at the Institute, but now I felt a strong attraction. However, it was shortly before the blossoming of the oranges, and several trees were already in bloom. They were brighter, and heady fragrances were wafting from the gardens, mingling with the lavender. It all blended on my skin. Part of my ambivalence is the fact that a precise female intelligence is likewise off-putting. Then again, this is not true of the top female minds, as borne out by a number of great encounters. At our academies, of course, the apple of Paris is scarcely weighed, and happy marriages are exceptions here. Fine. But during that walk I felt a tension that threatened to become unendurable. We lost the thread of our conversation. The pauses were strenuously overcome. It was harder and harder for me to hold back. Granted, I was not only her teacher, I was also her ideal. I had often perceived this during the year, nor had she made any bones about it. But what would happen if I touched her? I could picture it, the incredible surprise, the deadly hush in the moonlight while our faces turned pale, perhaps teary. The image was destroyed. So I walked her as far as her front yard. Till tomorrow, then. I avoided her hand. As I have said, I would be close by whenever I stayed with my dad. I walked up and down in front of his house, cooling my forehead. Then I went in. No sooner had I shut the door than someone knocked. Ingrid was standing at the threshold. The light was still on in the hall. She handed me a note. I was able to read it. "Please do not stand on ceremony." I put out the light with my right hand and drew her in with my left. My father was upstairs, working late as usual. My brother had already retired. The floor was marble, a hard bed, but we did not stand on ceremony. She had made all necessary preparations. The surf of that moment foams even over the memory. I must have fallen asleep on the spot. When I awoke, I found myself alone. I felt as if I had been dreaming. Strangely, little changed between us. Our conversations grew more intense, as if a barrier had fallen. Whenever I am in the city, I spend my mornings at the Institute. I report to Vigo, give my lecture, visit the advanced students at their workplaces. As for my own research, I find time enough at the Casbah. My tour ends in Ingrid's cell. We discuss the current problem and play at the luminar for an hour or so. The conversation develops further as we walk to the harbour. For a while we sit by the dock where the boats are moored. It is high noon at the marina. I take her to my sparsely furnished room. Not a word is said about this, just like during that nocturnal stroll. We glide through the streets and up the stairs as if on rails. I have often wondered what, if anything, she feels at these times, or whether she considers it a duty, not as an act of submission, but more as an inherent matter of course. In any case, words are superfluous. We limit ourselves to the necessities. Accordingly, I have never seen her naked, although I feel her body through the cloth. She bears only her thighs and fleece. On the other hand, it would be presumptuous to say that the matter at hand predominated. Naturally, I have to control myself to avoid whispering indecent words to her, as I love doing with Latifa. Rosner's museum has a room devoted to the birds that make their nests on the northernmost cliffs. Many of these birds are astonishing for their splendid plumage, their colors, their shimmering brilliance. Some of them were bagged by Attila, who tracked not only the fish up there. Life is concentrated in the polar night. I enjoy listening to him at the night bar during the wee hours. when he starts talking about his voyages beyond the pack ice belt. His face then takes on Neptunian features. I can see the trident in his hand. He ventures into the crevasses that split the iceberg. He forges all the way into the blue grottos polished by the swell. The plunging of glaciers reverberates in their cathedral. Lavender-blue ice crystals crackle under the bow. Even Iceland is south from here. We are alone. We continue our dialogue about the goldfinch plan. According to a Kabbalist exegesis, Leviathan dwells on towering citadels that are remote from one another, perhaps on cliffs. The Jews are scattered among them as strangers. From those heights, Leviathan battles Behemoth. Behemoth defends himself with his horns. Leviathan tries to suffocate him by stuffing his fins into Behemoth's nostrils, which, incidentally, is a lovely example of defeating a land by means of a blockade. The simile comes from Don Capisco. Ingrid discovered it in the Luminar. Like any fundamental corpus of work, the Kabbalah contains prophetic nuggets. This struck me in that depiction of Leviathan, which is also one of the titanic symbols of the catacombs. The people of Eumeswil think that the catacombs are subterranean. The reality is more subtle. Bruno is reticent with his allusions, but I suspect that he has lived in hollows made by Plutonian and human efforts. They contain extensive gardens with a flora more splendid than that of the upper world. The constant warmth and the strange light rays produce wonders. Botanists have released previously unknown forces of nature. I asked Bruno, "Doesn't that seem odd since the biologists are on the side of the forests?" "But you know that when Proserpina was picking flowers on a meadow, she was abducted by Pluto and carried off to the underworld." Of course, his answer pointed to times when luminaries of science fell into enemy hands because of either cunning or force and were turned around. The catacombs may be subterranean, but they vault up with the mountains. The resulting cones are filled with chambers and hermetically insulated like termitaria. These strongholds, and this recalls both Fourier and the Kabbalah, rule the intermediary spaces. The strongest, Fort Rhadamanthus, also functions as a satellite control center. From here, projectiles and spaceships are kept on their courses and guarded on cosmic ramps. Depending on the situation, they are steered toward or away from the Earth. Beyond the stratosphere, space is taboo, even for the great empires. Vigo feels that this would provide material for a Dante. Yet, as he adds, Dante had the frame and could make up the inferno, while metatechnology must first build this frame. Accordingly, it seems to aim more at limiting itself than dominating. When we play at the Luminar, sometimes with 4 hands if I join in, then a childhood memory surfaces in me. Dear old Dad was concerned about my education, that much I have to admit. He particularly succeeded in 2 areas. One was speed reading, which is indispensable at the Luminar. Beyond skimming or reading stenographically, one can gain a qualitative evaluation of a text from the various handwritings, the distribution of the capitals, the accents, the punctuation, which indicate not only what but also how to read. Otherwise, the immense amount of material could not be coped with. The other area was my piano lessons. The best hits we score are flukes. In our neighborhood, Signora Ricci was the undisputed music authority. She was an émigré from Smyrna. Greek, Lebanese, Jewish. Our city is a melting pot. She taught piano in the summer and dance in the winter. A brunette with a full figure and gentle features that recalled a Murillo painting. There was down on her upper lip whenever she grew energetic, and during dance lessons, too, there was something of a circus about her. For instance, when she clapped her hands, "The ladies alone now, messieurs, à genoux." Precise decorum, as demanded by her profession. I went there reluctantly, like a young dog who has to be carried to a hunt. That was the period of my dismal hours in the attic. I was about to be tormented once again by Diabelli's minuet. By the 5th measure, I invariably fluffed a note. Then came the slap on my hand. The slap was the best part of the lesson. It was light, even gratifying, plus that dark voice, Muttonhead, Butterfingers, you're incurable. There is a technique to everything. I practiced the minuet at home, as if typing letters of the alphabet. In this way I produced a correct listless text. The slaps stopped, the lessons grew boring. The left thumb must sink on the E. I failed to do so and was unmasked a tempo. "Are you trying to get my goat? You did that on purpose." And she wove her fingers into mine. You can imagine what came next. Now I could hardly wait for my lessons, and I would often hear "Butterfingers" and also "You're incurable," an ambivalent word. My melancholy faded as if blown away. I got over my mother's death and also became a good student in my other subjects, learning not by heart, but with my heart. The Signora claimed to be 35. Today I believe she was going on 50. There is no better age for an initiator into the mysteries. The teachers will shine with the brilliance of heaven. Just why have I brought her up? Oh, right. I'm playing four-handed duets with Ingrid at the Luminar. Now it is I who put my hand on hers. I pass along what I have learned. These are crisscross interweavings, a party-colored carpet woven not only for one's own pleasure. When describing my free evening at the Kasbah, I neglected to mention the chess game. The board is near the wine and the fruit. It must not be touched. The game has only an opponent but not an enemy. It is played as an agon between equals. Hence it is created no less for the anarch than for kings. The bold attack, the cunning snare laid for the player, arouses Olympic contentment in him. He can play against himself, as I do here in the Kasbah. The match goes on throughout a service period. To save moves, I first build up one of the opening gambits that have stood the test since Philidor. Then the game begins. It is limited to one move per day. The interval is enough to make me forget the motives that spurred me the previous day. The man who plays against himself must not look over his shoulder. The pleasure is archaic. I move the pawns and noble pieces, the agile bishop, the cunning knight, the powerful rook, the king, the queen. The Kasbah is hushed. Destiny is concentrated. I achieve a state in which the figures are no longer important but meaningful. They become autonomous. The simple soldier turns into the commander. The marshal's staff he was carrying in his kit bag becomes visible. Whether ivory or wood, day or marble, the material is concentrated. It reduces itself to its final denominator, no matter if the stakes are hazelnuts, kingdoms, or mere honor. Ultimately, we always play a game of life and death. I am still with Latifa. The game did not go beyond the opening gambit. A girl from the river basin, Aphrodite is in her, as in Cleopatra and in every woman. I could lead her through the black and white squares all the way to the far edge. A pawn becomes queen. Had I taken back the scudo, I would have made the first move in that direction. But why her, of all women? In each man, a shepherd slumbers, and the goddesses appear to him as they did on Mount Ida.